Dick Cheney, former Vice President Dick Cheney, has died. And the way that corporate media has been talking about Dick Cheney today, you would have thought they were talking about someone else. So tonight on this show, we're going to tell you who Dick Cheney really was. Like, this is laughable to me. Like, they're acting like, oh my God, well, Dick Cheney, da da da. No, we're going to tell you the truth about who Dick Cheney was on this show. Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here. This was the announcement. Dick Cheney has died.
To the end, he never wavered, defending the Iraq War and the harsh interrogation tactics that defined his vice presidency, making him a lightning rod for critics, but an icon to conservatives.
Thank you all very much. Knock it off. A welcome like that's almost enough to want to make me run for office again.
Dick Cheney always spoke his mind, justifying interrogation practices later judged to be torture.
They were legal, essential, justified, successful, and the right thing to do.
In the end, his advice was even rejected by the commander-in-chief when George W. Bush fired Cheney's closest ally, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. It was a turn of events no one would have predicted when Richard Bruce Cheney became the 46th Vice President of the United States.
So help me God.
He had already served as the youngest White House Chief of Staff under Gerald Ford, a powerful congressman from Wyoming, and Secretary of Defense under the first President Bush. Born in Nebraska, Cheney's family moved to Casper, Wyoming when he was a boy. He won a scholarship to Yale but quit, finally graduating from the University of Wyoming and marrying his high school sweetheart, Lynn, a leading conservative author and commentator.
The man I married has a very interesting mind. Problems get redefined, and you find yourself thinking about things in new ways.
The Cheneys had...
Let's just pause here for a second. Yeah, thinking about things in new ways. Like, I don't know, starting a war based on a lie, watching all those people die, torturing people. I don't know, new things like that. People have to know that Dick Cheney was the architect of the Iraq War. And even though he was vice president at the time, he actually had a lot of power. It's interesting how some people will assert themselves in certain ways. But he actually had a lot of power. And he was in George W. Bush's ear quite often, from what I understand. The architect of the Iraq War. Some of you watching now, you may have family members, friends, maybe classmates who had to go, serve in Iraq. You may have known people who died in Iraq. You may have known some of the Iraqis who were killed. That all goes back to Dick Cheney. He's a war criminal. That's the way they should describe Dick Cheney, instead of this method they're using here.
2 daughters, Mary, mother of 2, whose same-sex marriage was strongly supported by her parents well before the Supreme Court weighed in, and Liz, mother of 5 and her father's political heir, elected to Congress from Wyoming just like he was, but incurring the wrath of Donald Trump for standing up against the former president and investigating the January 6th insurrection. In 1989, as the first President Bush's Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney became known as the cool-handed leader of the first Gulf War against Saddam Hussein.
The cool-handed leader. Listen to the way that they're describing him instead of just calling him. This is how I would describe it. Dick Cheney was a war criminal. He started the war in Iraq and he based it on a lie and said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. A lot of Iraqis died. A lot of U.S. soldiers died too. That's something that Dick Cheney did. Also, to go along with Dick Cheney was the help of Tony Blair. These people are war criminals. I don't know why they're even trying to fluff this as they can. Wait till we get to the next video. The way that they're trying to discuss Dick Cheney and who he was. No weapons of mass destruction.
3 o'clock Thursday morning in the Gulf, the armed forces of the United States began an operation at the direction of the president.
During the Clinton years, Cheney made millions as CEO of Halliburton, the Dallas-based oil equipment company, until George W. Bush asked him to lead the search for a running mate in 2000, and Cheney ended up taking the job himself. He quickly became the most visible take-charge vice president in memory, briefing the press, briefing Congress, briefing the president.
Main reason I'm there is to serve him. He needs people around him who care only about his success, who are prepared to give him honest advice and never sugarcoat it.
He helped shape a cabinet some said looked more like Cheney's than Bush's, in a White House that for a while appeared to be a co-presidency.
Do you hear that? The way that he shaped a cabinet? Again, he was the vice president, not the president, but look how much power he had as vice president.
Cheney was the prime mover behind the theory, later proven wrong, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
We know he's been absolutely devoted to trying to acquire nuclear weapons, and we believe he has in fact reconstituted nuclear weapons.
This is something I point to as well. When Kamala Harris was bragging about getting this support, this endorsement from Dick Cheney, that was not something to brag about. What Kamala Harris should have done at that time is she should have called Dick Cheney out for the war criminal that he is. Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but that was the lie that Dick Cheney and George W. Bush used to tell the American people, this is why we're going to war with Iraq. And even at that time, it didn't make sense to me because I was just, I was young, but I was still trying to figure things out like, okay, let me get this straight. Now, first they said that we were attacked on September 11th, and they said the guys that were flying those planes, that took over those planes, were from Saudi Arabia. Now you're telling me that we're going to war with Iraq, not Saudi Arabia. But you say this is in response to 9/11, but then you're saying that it's because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Never made any sense to me. But I was young, and I was just like, oh, maybe I don't know as much as I was willing to learn and find out more. There were very few representatives who voted against the U.S. government going to war with Iraq. Very few. The majority of representatives voted for it. A war based on lies.
Contrary to CIA reports, Cheney also linked Saddam to al-Qaeda and 9/11 and predicted Iraq would fall quickly.
Things have gotten so bad inside Iraq from the standpoint of the Iraqi people. My belief is we will, in fact, be greeted as liberators.
Pay attention to what he just said there. Let's go back just a little bit more, because this word to me is important.
Quickly.
Things have gotten so bad inside Iraq from the standpoint of the Iraqi people. My belief is we will, in fact, be greeted as liberators.
Be greeted as liberators. This is the same thing that Benjamin Netanyahu has said when he talked about Gaza, when he's talked about the West Bank. He's even said they want to go on to liberate countries in Africa. Like, this idea of liberate really does mean regime change, that they want to topple the leader. They want to put in a Western puppet that will do their bidding and at their beck and call. And then what we find is that the people in those countries are often worse off than they were before the regime change happened. Now, here's something I said before about Saddam Hussein. We don't go around praising Saddam Hussein, but one of the things that I noticed is that when they toppled Saddam Hussein, that opened the door for ISIS to rise. When Saddam Hussein was there, he was able to keep some of those factions in check. But with Saddam out of the way, ISIS was able to come in and rise. And that's on purpose. That's on purpose. So no good comes from regime change. Let's speed ahead a little bit here so we don't show the explosion part there. And then there's a part where, of course, he accidentally shot his friend. Let's go on a little bit more here.
Scooter Libby for lying to a grand jury about the outing of a CIA operative. Throughout his public life, Cheney also battled heart disease, suffering his first heart attack in 1978 during his first run for Congress. Just days after being elected vice president, he underwent a procedure to open a clogged artery, and soon after, a pacemaker. Once out of office, Cheney underwent a successful heart transplant. Still, to the end, he stuck to his deeply conservative roots, making him one of the most powerful and controversial vice presidents in recent American history.
So this is another thing that sometimes some people may not be aware of, is that Dick Cheney has had like about 5 heart attacks from what I understand. There was a movie called Vice. It starred Christian Bale. He played Dick Cheney. A hell of a performance by Christian Bale, by the way. But after I watched that movie, I did research some of those things myself to see what actually did happen, what actually did not happen. And I want to break this down. Dick Cheney was not a nice person. Of course, we all know the Iraq War, but there were other things that Dick Cheney did along the way. He was against the Head Start programs for kids. He was against that. Just one of those people that really did believe that the US government was in the right to come in and just topple these countries and take over for the people. You'll see here on CNN, they discuss a little bit more about his health.
Earlier, who was his cardiologist all of these years. Dick Cheney had 5 heart attacks and a heart transplant along his life. You know, obviously the family is heartbroken today, but they really did have many more years with him than they, you know, expected because of the care he got and advances in cardiology.
Yeah, and I mean, such a long life in years and in also what he experienced, what he was part of, and what he brought about in the world of politics. I mean, it is hard when you're talking about a vice president to think of someone who's had more impact in the office of vice president than Dick Cheney, Jamie.
Listen to the way that they're talking about Dick Cheney, the war criminal, right? Now, let me go back to the very beginning of this video because I thought I heard someone laugh at the beginning. You guys have got to see this and tell me if you hear the same thing. And I think it's the guy in the middle. Listen to
Breaking news this morning, former Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. For a stretch of about 30 years, it's hard to list many people who had a greater effect on the course of American history. Cheney's family says he died due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. The Cheney family released a statement saying, in part, Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing.
Did you hear it? Did that sound like he laughed a little bit? Did it sound like he laughed when he said the kindness part? Okay.
We are grateful beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we're blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this noble giant of a man. CNN's Wolf Blitzer looks back at Dick Cheney's life and legacy.
Gradually, I realized that the person who was best qualified to be my vice presidential nominee was working by my side.
For most of his adult life, Richard Bruce Cheney was the ultimate Washington insider.
That I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
Named as George Bush's running mate in 2000, Dick Cheney quickly forged a public identity as a no-nonsense, disciplined gatekeeper, a powerful politician to whom and through whom access and influence flowed. But his appearance at the very highest levels of government was by no means his first time in the national spotlight.
And then they go into his history before, which we already showed you. But anytime someone mentions Dick Cheney to me, I just think about all the people that died in Iraq. And I remember Madeleine Albright not caring about those Iraqi children. I remember the statement she made then, and she tried to come back and apologize or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah. See, this just goes to show you how the landscape is so different now. If you look at the time that we're in now, more Americans now are anti-war. And don't get me wrong, there were people that were anti-war during that time as well. But I feel like it's louder now. And I feel like it's louder now because of social media. We didn't have social media back then. So I feel like a Dick Cheney type of candidate or George W. Bush type of candidate would not fare well today. I think we all can say we saw that with Nikki Haley when she ran in the Republican primary. As you could see, a lot of people were just not interested in her. And then there was the fact that Dick Cheney, till this day, would not apologize for the torture that was used in Iraq as well. Here he is. This was years later when he was confronted by Chuck Todd, not willing to apologize for the torture methods that were used. Listen to this. He doubled down.
No apologies, no regrets from former Vice President Dick Cheney for the harsh CIA interrogation techniques used on terror detainees after 9/11. What the Senate Intelligence Committee labeled torture in its blistering report this past week, the former VP today called necessary as he delivered a powerful counterattack this morning on NBC's Meet the Press. Mr. Cheney took strong exception to that Senate report and, contrary to its conclusions, told our Chuck Todd that the interrogation techniques absolutely worked. NBC's Kristen Welker is at the White House tonight with more on this. Kristen, good evening.
Lester, good evening. Facing heavy criticism after the Senate intelligence report was released this past week, former Vice President Dick Cheney was unapologetic today and said the Bush administration got it right.
Look, guys, it's Kristen Welker. But before she was working with Meet the Press, right? Before she had the desk job at Meet the Press where she is today, or is it Face the Nation? One of them, Meet the Press, Face the Nation. I forget which one, but this is her back in the day.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney unwavering in his support for the harsh interrogation tactics that happened on his watch, today ratcheted up his defense on Meet the Press.
I'd do it again in a minute.
Cheney argued the methods, including prolonged periods of waterboarding, were necessary in the wake of the September 11th attacks and insisted the procedures were not torture.
Torture was what the al-Qaeda terrorists did to 3,000 Americans on 9/11. There's no comparison between that and what we did with respect enhancement.
So do you see the rhetoric that is coming from Dick Cheney's mouth here? It's similar to what you hear people say today. What happened to the Palestinian people is nothing compared to what happened on October 7th, the brutal, horrific attack on October 7th. So they've been playing this game. If people are not aware, waterboarding is a method of torture. It's just one of the methods that were used, not all of them. When someone waterboards you, it basically feels like you're drowning. Yes, that is a form of torture. So even years later, after the Iraq War, Dick Cheney doubled down and did not regret torturing people. I mean, this is a sick dude.
A fired-up Cheney called the report politically motivated, and that was his more tempered language.
I won't use the word on your show. It may be family. It's a crock. It's not true.
And he disputed the report's claim that the interrogation tactics provided no credible information.
Absolutely all of this information in here, no seed of doubt that whether this worked or not.
It worked. It absolutely did work.
But one of the strongest critics of the program, Republican Senator John McCain, who was tortured as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, took to the Senate floor this week to argue just the opposite.
I know from personal experience that the abuse of prisoners will produce more bad than good intelligence.
And today, McCain again questioned Cheney's claim that the techniques worked.
It's not about them. It's about us. It's about us. What we were, what we are, and what we should be.
Democrats said.
Isn't it weird watching this again, like going back and seeing this and seeing John McCain and how things were back then? It's so weird now. It's just so weird. But John McCain at that point in time came out against this when a lot of his comrades weren't willing to do so. You see, it's a little bit more, I feel like it's easier today for people a part of the Republican Party to say no more wars. No, we don't want to be a part of this. But at that point in time, I felt like John McCain kind of stood alone. Let's continue on a little bit more here.
What happened was, in fact, torture.
With respect to waterboarding, and the vice president is obviously comfortable with it, I consider it to be torture.
Still, there seemed to be little appetite on either side of the aisle for reopening a Justice Department investigation into those responsible for the program. The big question now, what this debate means for the future of the CIA.
I think that going forward, you'll see CIA officers very hesitant to use many of these kinds of techniques as long as they remember this investigation. But it's hard to change an institution for many generations.
It's hard to change the institution for many generations. Yeah, the thing is like, that's just one of the methods that was used. But Dick Cheney was a war criminal. He agreed with torturing people, and then even after the fact, didn't apologize for it, say no, it was the right thing to do at that point in time. He told the American people that we were going to war with Iraq because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. That was false. Think about all the people that died under Dick Cheney's direction. So I don't know how, young everyone is in the chat, but some of us remember, and some of us had friends that went to Iraq. Some of them didn't come back. A war built on a lie. That was Dick Cheney. Never forget that, folks. But Dick Cheney has now died. Did I play the Noam Chomsky part? Yeah, Noam Chomsky commented about that too a while back. The genocidal, shout out to that squirrel again. The genocidal Zionist war criminal Dick Cheney is dead, but his crimes should never be forgotten. They include firing depleted uranium shells into Fallujah, still causing babies to be born with deformities and cancer. He then endorsed Kamala Harris, which she gleefully touted. See, the chemicals that were used, like, people are still affected by that. This is what Noam Chomsky said at that point.
Fallujah, first of all, was one of the worst atrocities of the 21st century. The Iraq War itself was the worst crime of the 21st century, easily. Fallujah was probably the worst war crime carried out during that war. The Marines, 7,000 Marines attacked Fallujah, probably killed everyone who was there. They call them insurgents, but whatever that means. The first day of the invasion of Fallujah, you take a look at the New York Times, had a front page photograph of Marines breaking into the General Hospital, which is a war crime, throwing all the patients on the floor and shackling them, throwing the doctors on the floor. It was hailed as a triumph. Yeah. When the high command was asked why they broke into the hospital, they had an explanation. They said it was a propaganda center for the insurgents. It was releasing casualty figures, and therefore it's legitimate to carry out a major war crime. Apparently pretty exotic weapons were used there, and there's evidence, which international agencies don't want to look at, of high levels of cancer, other effects of maybe depleted uranium, maybe something else. It's a major atrocity. So, but it's hailed here as a victory. The only way it is referred to now is as a tragedy because the Marines fought so hard to liberate Fallujah, and now ISIS is in control of it. I mean, you don't know what. See? And that's what I was pointing to. That's how ISIS was able to come about. So there's a lot, you guys. There's so much that could be said, but we got to keep the show moving on because we do have guests coming on for election night as well. But you guys get how I feel about this. It's just the way I'm hearing people talk about Dick Cheney. It's disturbing, absolutely disturbing. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.